Here.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rob Eshman. I'm the national and food editor of the Forward, forward.com. I am really excited for this session. It's both going to be super interesting and for me a little nostalgic because I met Jeremy Cowan 25 years ago when he was just starting. We were both just little puppies and he was starting Hebrew Shmaltz Brewing. So Jeremy Cowan, CEO, founder, Shmaltz Brewing, Hebrew Ale, welcome.
Happy to be here. Love it, Rob. I can't believe that this is such a cool reunion and I don't know, kind of the perfect excuse, right? Have a few beers, talk about 25 years.
I mean, always a good excuse for a beer, right? So, Jeremy, why don't we start? You were going to take us around your tap room there. You're up in Troy, New York, right?
I am. I'm in Troy, just north of Albany. And it's been quite an adventure getting here and staying here, but started in San Francisco 25 years ago. And, never thought so many of the things we're going to talk about tonight would have ever happened.
Right.
So we'll get into
quite
it.
Quite a journey.
I was thinking be kind of something fun, a little bit different. Most webinars don't include a tour of a bar at 8 o'clock at night on a Thursday. We've got a fantastic local jazz band in the house. We've got our runners club, the Collar City Runners, and I've got a ton of beer. And so I thought I'd give you a little glimpse.
Take us around.
What's going on? Let's do it. So, all right. I am currently in the back room of our tasting room. This is our neighbor and good friend at Primo Botanica. He does an entire plant-based chocolate program that is unbelievable. So if anybody's around here, come over and try this stuff.
In LA, Primo Botanica means something completely different.
Exactly. Well, it's just, and actually his cousin is in LA and he gets the cacao beans and processes them down there. So there's a great story. But tonight, you'll hear a little bit of jazz in the background, and then it's going to be too loud for me to hear you guys. So I'll just keep talking as if you know exactly what's going on. So this is, might recognize this bad boy.
There you go.
This is the original Hebrew The Chosen Beer logo, which used to be a dancing green rabbi looming over the stones of Jerusalem and the Golden Gate Bridge, but we kind of lightened him up as we went into the new generation in 2003. So that was a couple of years ago. We've got a little tasting room with a ton of our cans, fabulous 22-ounce bottles. Just it's a fun spot to come hang out.
Beautiful.
Check out what we've been
and
up
people
to.
could go up there. It's open. It's in Troy, and people can go up there.
Hold on one sec. So you can see, give it a little tour. That's the band. Those are musicians too. There's the bar and the running club. It's about like 30 or 40 people that come out for the running club. It's pretty awesome. And it is a brisk fall night. Nothing crazy. It's maybe 50s. It's like almost like San Francisco. So no complaints from me. Our little town is kind of a late 1800s industrial, groovy little architectural gem. There is our fabulous Monument Square that is on Memorial Day as a tribute to war veterans from 4 different wars.
I see you have a little outdoor area too, outside the tasting.
Yeah, we just brought it out of the parking spots into the sidewalks. So not quite as cool as New York City and San Francisco, who are doing it full year round, but we had a good run and we just had it all summer long. It was really neat. So
people who log on, I'm welcoming everybody. This is forward.com. We're talking to Jeremy Cowan, the founder, CEO of Shmaltz Brewing, Hebrew Ale, who's closing up shop after 25 years. So you're not closing that shop. Why don't you explain, what's happening with Hebrew? Because that's really why we're here.
Of course. So after 25 years, I'm going to have the grand finale for our brand. And people used to get confused because, I don't know, Jewish content and consumer products are a little confusing sometimes. So they were like, wait, so what's it called? And I'd say, well, the brand is Hebrew, the company is Shmaltz Brewing Company. And our first creation, 1996, the one I walked into your office in 1997 with, was called Genesis. Good place to start.
Make sense.
And so I made Genesis in the beginning, and then the next beer I kind of skipped right to the end and made a beer called Messiah. That was our second beer. Obviously, the punchline for that was, it's the beer you've been waiting for. And so 25 years in, it has been, and we'll talk about lots of the details, but what a crazy roller coaster. Amazing that it ever got past the first beer. I mean,
Right.
there was no demand for it. Wasn't like we want Jewish beer. We can't wait for Jewish beer. Give us Jewish beer. It's the only thing we're missing.
I mean,
And,
not just that, nobody, I mean, if you say, what do you think of when you think of the word Jew? I would say beer is just way down the list. No, what are you opening?
I'm opening our Bittersweet Lenny's RIPA. It is a rye-based double IPA. It is a tribute to a fallen hero, fallen not very far from where you are sitting in Los Angeles, Lenny Bruce. And we did this for our 10th anniversary, and we just reduxed it after a few years. It's a very important beer for Shmaltz Brewing.
Well,
And
because you closed up shop, I could not find any Hebrew in Los Angeles. So I'm just having another microbrew. It's called Belching Beaver.
Of course, good stuff. You've picked the winner.
And I'm just encouraging everybody watching at home, grab yourself a beer. We're going to have a little quick post.
Yeah, I like it.
Jeremy.
Cheers. So glad to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
Nothing to sniff at, but now we're going to get into the hard questions, right?
It's really hard hitting. I mean, this stuff is brutal. This level of journalism.
What's the alcohol in that?
It's a modest 8.5. When we originally had it was 10. It was 10 malts, 10 hops, 10%. As I say on the label, brewed with an obscene amount of malts and hops, far beyond contemporary tastes for community standards. And it's a lovely beer. I mean, the rye and the caraway really come through. And this beer will be distributed throughout the East Coast. Like right now, it's already shipped to Florida and New Jersey, a little bit to New York. So it'll be all on the East Coast, and then people can hit our website and see where else we're selling it. So
I'm encouraging people, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. And I see Jesse Epstein asked a question about advice for beer brewing. I'm gonna definitely get to that. There was a question earlier about what's the future of the brand. I want to get to that, but I really want to start, Jeremy, going back to the beginning. I want to talk about this journey, like what possessed you to start the Hebrew beer brand, Hebrew beer brand.
I know. Well, so it's been written, and I mean, you wrote, and as did many. The very, very original idea was an inside joke with my group of friends from high school. And I wrote about it in my fantastic 325-page small business memoir, Craft Beer Bar Mitzvah, which we wrote for my 13th birthday, anniversary, beer birthday. And so friends from high school playing volleyball in Menlo Park, California, all of us slightly underage, a couple of us with slightly fake IDs. And my fake ID, I guess at this point I can admit, since it's already been in the book, was obtained through a falsified baptism certificate, which we took to the California State DMV. And at the time they were accepting baptism certificates, and you could get a card, like a identification card. So we were drinking some beers, hanging out, and it turned out like the two Jewish kids out of my group of friends we were on the same volleyball team. Josh Weinstock, ladies and gentlemen, give him a little shout out. He's in Southern California now as well. And Josh and I were on the same team playing against all our friends who were not Jewish. And we were like, what's the deal? Is this the Jews versus the Gentiles? Is that what's going on today? And so, as boys will be boys, they started talking a little bit of smack. And we were like, you know what this team needs? We need our own beer. Like, you guys could drink Coors Light and, all the kind of mass market. We need our own beer. And you know what? it's time America had a Jewish beer, because the Jews have been here for, at that point, 347 years, something like that. And we were like, now that would be really cool. And we'll call it, of course, Hebrew. And the back of the t-shirt would say, don't pass out, pass over. And it literally, that was it. It was just an inside joke with my group of friends for
I mean, that's
years.
what's so crazy. Like, we all have these ideas, like, you know, I'm sure everybody on this Zoom and all of us have had like, hey, let's start blank, you know, but
Yes.
we don't do it. I mean, you went and you
Well,
came up with this crazy name and you did it. What, you know, how
the
did you get it
number
off the ground?
the number of people who have come up to me at beer festivals over the years, and they're like, you stole my idea. My roommates and I, we homebrewed Hebrew when we were 1968, 74, 85, 91. I'm like, you should have done it, because then I could have come and drank your beer. Yeah, I mean, I was on vacation with my girlfriend at the time and her parents, and they're from Cleveland. And you know, I've told the story a lot, where Northern California Jews, we're like, there's a fair amount of them, but they're a little undercover. I mean, not the
Yeah.
most out. Cleveland Jews, no qualms. They're like LA Jews. You know what's going on. And then there's lots of bar mitzvahs and weddings and brisses and everything else. So they needed their own beer. And her dad was an entrepreneur. And he's like, you know, that's not the worst idea, actually. There isn't a Jewish beer. And if it were funny and fun and delicious, wouldn't other people drink it? And so I basically was like, no, I don't think other people would drink it. And I'm not quitting my day job. And I think that's not a great idea, that I should do this with my full-time career. I was 27. I worked at a arts organization that made audio tours for museums like the Smithsonian. And that seemed pretty cool. I love the arts. I was working in that arena. But I had worked at a brew pub in New Orleans, Crescent City Brew House. And when I lived in the French Quarter, and you know, I knew almost nothing about really good craft beer, and I knew even less about actual business. I mean, I joke all the time, when I went to go deliver the first case of Hebrew in Northern California, I was going to 2 Whole Foods and 2 Molly Stones. And I asked the brewer that I was working with, like, so do I just go to the cash register and get this beer? Like, how do they pay us? And he goes, no, man, you got to give them an invoice, and then, you know, go to the back door receiving clerk and they'll clock it in. And then I'm like, cool. What's an invoice? And you know, never, like, my mom was an administrator at a university for her career and had a wonderful, very impressive career. I was really proud. My dad was a special ed teacher at Beverly Hills High School, and I was very happy about that. But we didn't talk about business. Like, it never came up. I had nobody in my immediate universe that I was interacting with was talking about distribution and sales and marketing and product development and finance and lines of credit. And it was like, well, I don't know, just be hilarious and fun and delicious. So my friends helped squeeze pomegranates at our house in San Francisco, and I took the pomegranate juice down to the brewery because there was no pomegranate juice in 1996. Right. Much like there was lots of things. There were a couple of new websites that we stumbled on, and there was one little email address that I got, and there was a tiny little voicemail in the back of the local, you know, weekly freebie. And it just kind of happened, and not unlike a zillion other entrepreneurs. So it did. What's amazing to me is that the level of pain and suffering that most entrepreneurs are able to endure, you only realize later. Like, you don't, going into it, you have no idea. And then while it's happening, you're not even sure you're going to get through the morning. But years later, you go, yeah, it's rough. There's a lot of moving parts. You know, we've got a bunch of cliches about business and stuff.
And then on the other side, it seems like you were really trying to market through Jewish organizations, through Jews. I mean, that was your market. Like, you know, it worked for Manischewitz, worked for Straits, worked for some people.
Ironically, it did not work as much for Manischewitz. They got to a certain place, and they're the first to admit that they sold more Manischewitz to non-Jews drinking Manischewitz during the 70s and 80s than they did to Jews.
Exactly. And I think that's my question. Like, did you have any idea of what was this Jewish market? How were you going to get people to buy this stuff?
Yeah. So the reason that I wanted to do it 10 years later, it was an inside joke with those friends, and we would trot it out along lines when we'd be quoting things like Blazing Saddles or Caddyshack or Blues Brothers and Hebrew and ha ha ha, don't pass out, pass over. But when I was 25, I grew up in Northern California, and much like a lot of kids, I went to Sunday school. I was bar mitzvahed. I was confirmed. I went on my Israel trip. We drank a little bit of beer. There wasn't a drinking age, and maybe some girls were kissed, and it was a really wonderful coming of age experience. And that's what Israel was: Yad Vashem, maybe Dead Sea, and
Yeah.
come home and you're tan and feel Jewish. And then 10 years later, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take a vacation from DC after New Orleans, after Washington, DC, and I'm going to move to Jerusalem. And I'm going to do this thing that I read about. I found a flyer for that was like public service, hiking, and education in Jerusalem, 10-week program. I'm like, that sounds easy. That'll be cool. I'll go cruise over to Tel Aviv and hang out, have a great time, and I'll be Jewish for a little while. Well, little did I know that, the minute I got there, it was like, oh, by the way, it was kind of pre-yeshiva for kids who had no idea what they were getting into. And it's a program called Leaf Note, Ulahiba Note. And I will forever give them credit for, basically converting me to Judaism and giving me the tools and curiosity and imagination that would be necessary for me to have a life of exploring Judaism in a way that I never would have had before. So I came back from that experience thinking, all right, I got to work at a Hillel, at a JCC, at a Jewish museum. And so I was looking into all of that when this came up. And the combination of kind of like my dad's young Frankenstein humor and my passion for understanding what the 7 species were and why it was relevant to my life in San Francisco kind of really pushed me towards doing it. And you're absolutely right. I spent a lot of time with Jewish organizations for many, many, many years to this day. We just had Federation and Hillel here in Troy for one of our farewell tour events, a couple days ago. And it's really wonderful. And that's been a huge part of growing this brand, is being sincere, irreverent, and serious about the sense of humor and making the connections between a passage from the Torah and a Beastie Boys lyric and a Sarah Silverman punchline. Like that to me is my Jewish life. And I've tried to do that over and over and over again through the labels, through the recipes, through the marketing, through the events. And that's something that I'm really proud of. I really love even just looking back on the things, and I still love doing it. I mean, I put Bart and Lisa on the last label. We'll be drinking this in a little bit, called Exodus 2021.
Oh.
And Tolstoy is on there, Bart and Lisa's on there, and the Torah is on there. It's a pretty good combo.
You're right.
Nice way to live.
That's a good combo. Did going through the Jewish groups, was that a source of growth and revenue and success, or was it more of a
in the very beginning, I remember I did every Jewish group in San Francisco, and it was kind of a glorious time, I will say, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit. The late 90s were amazing. Like, we had parties and the Jewish museums opened and expanded, and the young adults division of everything was like super fun and amazing. And so I did a lot. I launched the beer at a party for a Jewish magazine called Davka. And it was a cool time, and there were interesting kind of movies and music, and
I mean,
a lot going on.
I mean, that was really the time. I was thinking when you mentioned Davka, there was Tikkun magazine, there was Noah's Bagels, which at the time was cool. I mean, now it's just another corporate outpost, but at the time, Noah's Bagel was like doing kind of what you were doing. They were kind of riffing on old Jewish.
Yeah, and there was soy vey, and I did an event with soy vey. It was delicious and wonderful.
And you were really kind of part of that whole exuberant, like, rediscovering Judaism, Jewish cool.
Yeah.
But you kept at it a lot. Those are all gone now. I mean, I think, kind of
a lot of this, I used to joke that, like, I started before Google, and I also started before Modest Yahoo, and one of them gave up the Jewish garb and one of them didn't. So I just It's a bigger conversation. I'm happy to dabble in it right now, but it's hard to make Jewish products that can survive in an only Jewish environment. I just yesterday went to Kosher Fest in the Meadowlands, world famous Kosher Fest, where everybody, I gotta say, it is amazing how much higher the quality of baked goods and coffee is at Kosher Fest here. Like, I think I went for the first time maybe 15 or 17 years ago. And
Well, look at the food in Israel 20 years ago and the food
sure,
now.
yeah,
Or food in general is better.
I know.
Now.
Well, and everything has been kind of gentrified and boutiqued out. I love that. I personally love boutique gentrification of food and culture, and not necessarily neighborhoods as much,
Right.
but I am a little bit of a yuppie, and you want to admit that, and I certainly am about beer. And I think that's been one of the things that was a huge shift for me. Was I originally, and I used to say this all the time, I started Shmaltz and Hebrew as a Jewish nonprofit. Like, in my mind, I was running an alternative program from the 92nd Street Y to the San Francisco JCC. Like, in my mind, that's what we were doing. And when I would partner with a band or partner with an artist or a literature event, it gave me that sense of connection. And then, as I used to joke all the time, I made sure it just stayed as a Jewish nonprofit because I was never profitable. I mean, it
was never profitable
in the years in the beginning. It was profitable we had a great run in the middle and really, really happy. But in those early years when I had one or two beers, and maybe it was the product, maybe it was the distribution. It's certainly, I'm a good salesman. I'm just not a good sales manager. And I used to spend a lot of time thinking about how I was going to sell more beer instead of just walking around and selling more beer. So it wasn't until 2003, 4, and 5 that I really flipped the business model.
And what happened? How'd you change it?
That's when it changed. I changed from being a Jewish nonprofit to being a brewery, a small beer brand that happened to use Jewish shtick and cloak itself. I never gave up. People all the time would be like, well, why don't you just tone down the Jewy part and you'll sell a lot more. I mean, I was on this show that this guy, Donnie Deutsch, was.
Yeah.
So he had it's called The Big Idea. And they flew me out to New Jersey for Hanukkah. And he basically said, this will never work. You got to make your reach wider. Like, Guinness has to be more than just Irish people. And I was like, no, I'm just going to stick with Jews. And the next year we sold $1 million worth of Hebrew beer. And I felt really proud of that. But it was when I went to more Whole Foods and Bevmo tastings than I did probably YAD and Hillel grad student tastings. Like, we still did them.
Right.
But I wasn't just trying to sell at Jerusalem Market and hope that Wally's would buy enough to sell. And I stopped focusing on Jewish holidays as much and focused on making beers that were really unique and different and interesting and outrageous. And it was the perfect moment, because as I was going through that change, the craft beer world was going through a huge change. And that laid the foundation for creating a business that would succeed in a way that beyond anything I would have ever imagined with Hebrew.
So what you were saying is so interesting, that the Jewish market isn't enough. Like, if you really want to create a successful brand in beer, I happen to think in other things too. Certainly Manischewitz, Empire, probably in Jewish media too, by the way.
Right.
There's just aren't enough Jews.
Yeah, I mean, look, we used to do the math, and it's like, they'd want you to do the business model. Well, size the market. You're like, well, dude, come on. There's 2% of the population are Jewish, half are too old, half are too young, and the other half don't drink. So you got basically 0% of the population is your market. And I'm like, I'm going to try to talk at some kids, some young people from Jewish fraternities and sororities eventually into doing stuff. But for the most part, it allowed me, you didn't have to be Jewish to love Fiddler on the Roof or Seinfeld or
The Forward.
Or The Forward. No, really, like, especially.
No, really.
And once it's the fabric of American life with Jewish shtick, then that worked really well for me. It was quality, it was community, and it was shtick. And the shtick, most breweries had mountains and dogs and fish and maybe wherever they were from. And for many years, I had, dancing rabbi that you couldn't really tell what he was doing. He was rocking out. And then I had Lenny Bruce and I had pomegranates. And so that was fine. It worked really well. Also, remember, my business model was when in 2003, I moved to Brooklyn and slept on my friend's couch, Park Slope, and moved all the production to upstate New York. And I was like, look, I'm going to sell a little bit of beer all over the country, but I'm never going to sell enough beer to Jews in any one place, even New York. It's just not enough volume. So that model where I ended up driving around the country for 5 straight years. And
Wow.
I didn't have an apartment. I sublet. I stayed at friends' couches and their parents' house and a Winnebago of one of my wholesalers. I did that for 5 years. And I picked up distribution all over the country. And it was a little bit of beer in about 37, 38 states. Right as craft beer became like, it broke out of the kind of little tiny thing in some little brewery near you to like, no, we really want beers like Dogfish and Stone and Victory and Allagash. And we want them wherever we live. I live in St. Louis. I live in Orlando. I live in Portland, Oregon. And I want that beer. So ship it to me and I'll buy it. Well, I had that model. So I had a little bit of beer going all over the country, and all of a sudden we just started making crazy beers, like, the Jubilation series. I saw one of your listeners, guest readers here who said Funky Jubilation, which I absolutely adore. That's our barrel-aged sour version of several years of Jubilation. It would be the same number of malts, hops, and alcohol as our anniversary. And we went from 8 malts, 8 hops, and 8% up to 18 was 17 was the most we did. 17 malts, 17 hops, and 17%. And these beers would just totally stand out, and they were spectacular and amazing. And we won every award there was out there, and it was just so fun and amazing to participate in a craft beer world that had just exploded.
Booming.
Based on but based on quality, innovation, and creativity.
That's what I think people, that's what I always appreciated with Shmaltz, with Hebrew. The quality was so much better than you think it had to be. Like Manischewitz is not good wine. Empire Chicken, it's good. It's not like the best chicken on the market, but
right.
You really created it. You not only had the humor, which is, circumcision. You had funny puns.
That was an April Fool's joke that just happened to get printed in so many different publications that we decided to make the beer the next year.
But it was a good beer, and you had
it was good beer.
She brew. You
had multiple,
but it was all good.
She brew. Yeah,
which I think, I also think is a missing component to a lot of kind of people who try to market to Jews. They think, well, if it's just kosher, it's enough.
Or if it's funny, it's enough.
Or if it's funny, it's enough. If it's the sticky.
You could tell. You in a second, you see the products that pop up and you go, oh, okay, well, that's a one-time purchase. And people used to say to me all the time, like, this beer's so good, why don't you get rid of the shtick? And that was the thing, that I didn't start this brewery to start Jeremy's beer company. Remember, I wasn't a brewer. I wasn't a business person. I wanted to be a Jewish organization. So once I turned it into a business and we started grossing $1 million, then 2 million, then 3 million, I eventually got up to pretty close to 5 million. And we had a team. I had 12 full-time sales and marketing people all over the country, and full-time logistics and operations. And then we built a brewery in upstate New York, and then we were up to about 25 people, and we were brewing beer for lots of other breweries too.
Did you ever in the Bay Area, when you started, did you have your own brewery, or you?
No, I was always contract. So that was in that era, it was another layer of thing where people were like, what's going on with that? We used mostly Anderson Valley Brewing Company in Northern California, and then switched to Mendocino Brewing Company on their East Coast. And but that was when contract brewing was kind of a dirty word. And so I just seized on it. I was like, yeah, but these guys have been named the top 10 breweries in the world 2 years in a row at the World Beer Championships. Like, they're my brewers. So, unless you were one of those brewers, you had to hire people anyway to work for you. And I don't know. The contract model, depending on who says who owns it, you can be really upset or you don't have to be upset. Lots of people have businesses for lots of different reasons. They're financed differently. They get opportunities. They, wake up on third base and hit the triple, that kind of stuff. Catching lightning in a bottle for beer is really, really hard. And the people who do it, it's amazing. The ones who can turn it from like a flash into a real business. That is a huge skill, and it is incredibly impressive. And you've seen people like at breweries like Dogfish and Stone and Allagash and
Here in
Ryan.
LA, we have a company called Three Weavers.
Yeah. I mean,
it just took off.
Yeah, and Doug at Society, I absolutely adore.
Yeah,
Nice Jewish boy. And
Golden Road is another
Golden
one.
Road, she did a great job. She was one of the kids that in Northern California that were like my sales manager's pals. And each one of them, I just saw a bunch of them, and each one of them went on to do these really neat, impressive things. And you could do that in craft beer, and it could be really meaningful. You could make a couple of bucks. Probably weren't going to get really, really rich, but a couple people could. And it was just so cool to see consumers flock to like something that carved out a reality for itself. There were like 70 breweries in the whole country when Sierra Nevada started, and now there's 10,000 breweries. And even when when Anchor got reinvented, when Fritz took over Anchor and reinvented it as craft beer, and Jim Cook creating Sam Adams, and Pete from Pete Schlossberg, my neighbor that I didn't even realize was a member of my synagogue in San Francisco.
Oh, I didn't know he's Jewish. Pete's Wicked Ale?
Oh,
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, and he's so wonderful. He's been like, these people share so much interesting connections with each other through their personalities and through their passion and their drive. But for me, what they also shared was their generosity about advice and time and support. And I love that. So I try to turn that around. And, people ask me all the time, like, should I start a brewery? What should I do? Currently I'm starting a consulting business, and I'm happy to tell people as a avocation, but professionally.
Well, what is Jesse Epstein asked, what advice do you have for someone in their mid-20s, which is what you were when you started, who are just getting started now? So what do you tell them?
Man, it really depends.
Take a big slug of beer.
It really depends. I mean, there are new breweries that can be really successful and hot and interesting. There are new breweries that they don't have to be hot because the business model makes sense. The way they use the real estate, the way they use their overhead. There's creative models of direct consumer sales where you can keep the margin. This is a hard business. It is, you make this thing and you pay a lot for this thing, and then you sell it for just a little bit more than you paid for it, and then you got to sell a lot more and do it over and over and over and over and over forever. And that is really hard. This business is built on a model for big businesses, like the huge conglomerate businesses. That's the model. So when you scale it down to a real craft, the dollars end up being complicated and the operations become really complicated. But listen, there's 10,000 people doing it, and some are doing an amazing job and really incredible stuff. So, Jesse, I'm happy to chat. You can do me a favor, hit me on, send an email to info@Shmaltz Brewing, and we'll get in touch. It might take a little while because I've got these anniversary parties all coming up right now, but we'll get a chance to chat. It's great. Opportunities are out there, but it's really hard to do. Yeah.
What was did you have this dream or goal of selling out to a big company like a Golden Road? Or
no? I didn't have any, because I didn't know enough about business when I started. So people would throw around. I was in San Francisco. It was pre-web boom, but as the web was happening, I'm witnessing around me people going like, and I'm going to sell my business to this guy, or we sold our business to that guy. And I was like, huh. And then people would say, wow, you should sell your business to Budweiser. They could sell to Jews. It's just the kind of stuff that from the outside, an entrepreneur just goes, yeah, anyway, I'm going to go back to work. So I was incredibly lucky. Another beautiful Jewish man from my life, Alan Newman, that I will forever be indebted to, was the founder of Magic Hat Brewing in Vermont, not too far from where I am now. And I had met him when I went to the East Coast to see where I could find a contract brewer. And I had looked at a couple of different breweries along the East Coast. I met him originally. So by the time we had a brand called Coney Island Craft Lagers that I'd started in Brooklyn with Matt Polachek, was our director and kind of creative partner. And we had spent 5 or 6 years growing a really cool craft lager brand that ended up being about half of the business. And Alan loved it. He was working, he started an incubator called Alchemy and Science. They were aligned with Sam Adams. So I ended up selling the Coney Island brand to Sam Adams, essentially through the Alphabet City. They also have Angel City in LA downtown. Your folks will know about. And then they've got a brewery in Miami. And so really cool project. And so I did my, I was able to sell out a little bit, and it helped. It's funny, people think any business means that somebody's rich, or they just set all their own hours. They don't have to answer to anybody. They're like, oh, I want to retire, and that's my dream, and oh my God, it's going to be amazing, and isn't it so cool? And then young people ask us, like, is this your real job? Like, you just sit around and drink beer and talk to people and stuff? And we're like, yes, it's exactly like that. It is a total dream. There's no hard work. There's no stress. You never have to work on holidays, 8 o'clock on a, federal holiday when somebody else is getting paid and has health insurance, and, you never have to work weekends. And it's just a misunderstanding about small business, but we don't want to ruin people's dreams. We want them to buy our stuff, and they want to incorporate that. And we do live it. Like, evidently we chose to live this, and we put up with the roller coaster for whatever ego reasons.
And
sometimes
did
money,
anybody
sometimes
like
not.
did any like rich Jewish entrepreneur or beer lover ever approach you, or any company approach you?
Well, I approached some rich Jewish, not particularly entrepreneurs, but I always thought, man, this would be the ultimate Jewish philanthropy. Get a bunch of
better
young
way
Jews
to reach
together,
young male Jews,
and then get them loaded and get them married and get them pregnant. Let's just get this thing done. A couple of people saw the vision, but for the most part, they were like, anyway, what was your bottom line last year? And be like, well, we sold some beer. I mean, it was a lot of work, and I didn't have an apartment. So I had some really wonderful investors over the years, friends and family, and very patient and understanding. And I will forever be grateful to them, because I never could have done it without them. And I had times where, I was really pushing it forward, and then there were times where I needed help. And it's an interesting, in the Jewish world, I think it's easier to digest donating to, a program or an organization. It's still a business. And I had times where I was like, maybe this should just be a Jewish nonprofit, and I should just take donations.
Did everybody expect, did all these Jewish nonprofits, when you would do a party, or when did they all expect the beer for free?
Yeah. I used to have an auto reply on my email, because they had an auto send on their email, which was, dear ... we think it would be a wonderful opportunity for you to get in front of our customers by donating X number of products to our fill in the blank holiday fundraiser. Please send the
800 cases. Yeah.
And you'd be like, okay. So I had an auto reply, which was, listen, we're smaller than everybody. Like, we were at that, especially at those stages, we were the smallest program of anybody. We were smaller than the, kids gymnastics program at the JCC at that point. So I would say, I'll tell you what if we did, like, maybe at cost, and I will come bring some tchotchkes, and we'll bring a little bit of swag, and I'll do a little song and dance, and we'll tell people the story, and we'll talk about Jewish identity in an entrepreneurial setting. And by the way, can you buy 10 t-shirts too? And then I can pay the rent. And, most of the time they were like, oh yeah, I understand where you're coming from. So the problem is with beer, though, when we were in 35 or 40 states, you can't really do it very efficiently. Like, if you're sending them, matzo chips or chocolate bars or something, that's a little bit more manageable. You can't really ship beer across state lines, and it's heavy. And So
Here's heavy.
I will say that there was a run where, man, the Jewish organizations were just so great to work with because they would hire me to come give a talk. So it was amazing. And it was a brief period where I was like, look at me, I'm a professional speaker. And I'd bring like a little bit of beer and I'd bring some glasses, and they were wonderful. And it was great for everybody because we could get to talk to people about how can you manifest your own Jewish vision in a professional setting, and find meaning and explore identity and celebrate along with the best ways of celebrating your culture. So
Boy,
it was
that
really cool. I had a bunch of
that
those really amazing experiences.
that dovetails to what anonymous attendee, an aspiring beer brewer rabbi, asked in a question. Do you think the company embodies Jewish values in any way? Did you try to incorporate what you think of as Jewish values in the actual running of the business?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I would say it was 100% Jewish content in that every label, every product, every recipe, every event, we always tied into, Jewish content or, music, literature, food, art, tradition. In terms of running the business, we didn't do Torah study, but we, in the beginning, it was my first employee was Jewish. I will give a shout out to Mr. Robert Graham, who's sitting probably quietly enjoying his evening in Oakland, California. And he was my first sales guy in San Francisco. He played Queen Esther in his childhood musical at his Jewish day school. So that's why I hired him. And my second employee was not Jewish, third employee not Jewish, fourth employee Jewish. He was the guy who hired me for one of those junkets at UC Davis at Hillel. So it's also funny, amazing to me how many non-Jewish employees I had over the years. Way more non-Jewish employees than Jewish employees. And I always was worried about that. I was like, do these people know? Don't they know Holocaust? Or, people hate Jews. And they'd be like, well, I don't know. I thought that last beer, was called Rejuvenator. It was made with figs and dates. It tasted good. It was pretty funny. You had that one quote about Barbara Streisand. That was clever. And then they're like, okay, I'll go sell it. And you just go, that's just like a very interesting realization. I would probably go work for a company that made a cool thing that it wasn't my identity, but I identified with it.
But there was this like evangelical, I don't know if that's the right word, quality to Hebrew, where you were kind of this you were this face of Judaism on the beer shelf. There was, so some guy going to buy a 6-pack suddenly, like, I don't know, you were kind of like a face, there's 72 faces of God. You were like one of those faces in the form of a beer bottle. And I think it was so, it was so unexpected and so interesting. You always did it with such humor. Did you have a lot of fun? Somebody asked a question, creating these beers. Like, was there a lot of trial and error? And
it's the best
drinking?
part. I mean, I wrote about it in the book. That was with the part where you really were living the dream. Like, I would go, okay, I had this idea for a seasonal beer in the fall, and I wanted to tie into this passage from the Torah, and it's going to have a quote from Henny Youngman and Sid Caesar and Rodney Dangerfield. But how are we going to figure out what this beer is going to be? And so I would go buy, 10, 20, 30 beers, and I would go and sit with my brewmaster and a couple other staff, and we would just taste beer and taste beer and taste beer. And I'd be like, all right, I know what I want it to taste like because it's got to tie into the shtick. And that was the most fun. And then collaborating with my art director, Matt, and with my publicist, Jesse, and with my sales team, Zach Davis, also sitting in Los Angeles right now. And that was so fun, thinking up a new variety pack, like Tribe Called Shmaltz or Shtick in a Box. It got to the point where That's
Well,
the best part. Like,
yeah. So, I mean, that sounds like so much fun, but like I've made beer once, craft beer in this room once, and
yeah,
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of, there's a long process. So when you were coming up with these brands, do you actually create, is that how brewers do it? They actually create the beer, or they just kind of imagine it?
I imagine it, and then we go make it. And we got to a point where I was we used to joke around because most people test batch and do everything else, but
Yeah.
I didn't own the brewery, and we didn't have a pilot system. They didn't have a pilot system. It was
Oh,
100 barrels.
wow.
If anybody's in the business, we went from Anderson Valley. So the little tiny brewery in Cupertino, I wanted him to make me 35 cases for Hanukkah of 1996. And he said, that's crazy. I can make you 100. So I was like, oh man, well, all right, whatever. I'll try to sell 35, and I'll probably have some cases left over for, I don't know, St. Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, Super Bowl. Next, I'll have cases forever. In Old Saratoga, it was 1,400 cases at a time. And there was no pilot system. We couldn't do a test batch. So we were just like, well, here's what it's going to be. Let's go for it. And even in Clifton Park, we didn't have a pilot system. So we used to joke that we had a saying that we thought, we don't, we're Shmaltz Brewing. We don't do test batches. Just, once you're good at it, you just do it. Like, how to write and edit, and it's going to turn out. There is a process. We had a process. It wasn't like we just threw a bunch of malt and hops and hoped for the best. I mean, we had a process based on our expertise. So I knew like how to art direct the production team. That was what I was really good at. And then I made sure that they kind of knew how to do it. And that was a good work.
Did you ever have any like total failures?
Disasters? Yeah, a couple times, but not a lot. Pretty astounding. Like when I hear stories of most breweries, very few, but a couple. For the most part, we had shocking success stories that we didn't expect. Like we'd have a recipe and go, this seems pretty cool, man. I think this is gonna be a really good beer.
Did
And
you
then we'd do something with it, like put it in a barrel and age it, or we'd make a sour beer or something, and it would be so unbelievably delicious, and we just couldn't have planned it any better.
did you ever crack the evangelical market? Did you, there's this connection between,
Exodus.
oh, there you go. Yeah.
Good timing.
What is that? What is Exodus? And
so this is Exodus 2021. This is our grand finale, on my way to the promised land. Gotta be so it is a barley wine brewed with pomegranates, figs, dates, and grapes.
Oh, that sounds so good.
It is wildly delicious and beautiful.
Am I going to be able to get that in LA?
You are going to be able to have your wonderful friends in San Francisco bring you some for Hanukkah from Molly Stone's and Bevmo, and probably a couple Whole Foods and Offie Coman and Berkeley.
So it'll be available in San Francisco.
Yeah. We the beer just arrived. So we had our big 25th anniversary party at Tornado, which was awesome. And then we had a Shmaltz liquor tasting, this new liquor project we did. We did that at the Rake, which is some good friends who own a malt house in Alameda called Admiral Malting. So yeah, you might have to sneak up to the Bay Area to get some Exodus and some RIPA, but it's worth it.
So Peter asked, are you considering making a few of your most popular Hebrew beers in the future, like limited runs or contract brewing for Peter who wants to buy 1,000 cases?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, maybe. There was a time where I thought, why don't I just stop and I'll go get a job and then I'll make a Hanukkah beer. And that's it. Like, just make a Hanukkah beer for fun. It's, Hanukkah turns out is not quite as big of a seller as Christmas. So when we did for years, Hanukkah versus Christmas, the battle royale of beers, and it would be at a bar in San Francisco and Brooklyn and Philly, Chicago, Orlando. It looked like it was an even fight because it'd be me and we'd have a beer like Jubilation 14 malts, 14 hops, 14%. And I'd do it with Anchor Christmas or Sierra Celebration or Great Lakes, or friends who had Christmas beers, and they'd be like a 5 or a 7%, ale for the holidays. But in the real marketplace, turns out, yeah, Hanukkah quite packed the punch that Christmas does. So
Yeah.
I yes, I want to. What I really would love is if Jesse and anybody else who's out there who thinks this is fun and interesting wanted to take a stab at it, because I'm closing the business, but it's not going away. I mean, I've got 55,000 people in social media. We have 14,000 people on our email list. I've got a platform for contract brewing. I mean, if somebody wants to take a stab at making a Purim beer, let's do it. I still have my federal licenses. I still have my state licenses. I still have the ability to sell to distributors. What I don't have is, I'm 52, soon to be 53, and I don't want to drive around the country, going door to door
Right.
to door to door. And I'd rather like go to Death of a Salesman.
Right.
I like reading it. And there's young people out there. There's young Jews today, and I tell you, they're out there, and they could drive door to door to door to door, or they could just ask the entire AE Pi fraternity to just pre-order one case of beer.
Pre-order. Yeah.
And we could just make it for them. Or, I mean, I was thinking Chabad should take over Shmaltz.
I'm shocked they haven't.
That's a no-brainer. I mean, just for themselves, they could have amazing parties with incredible beer.
I mean, I'm shocked they haven't thought about it.
So, well, I put it in there. I put it in front of them, and it turns out that not that many people who don't already own a Jewish beer company are going to own a Jewish beer company, because I have been waiting for years. All I want is I want to walk into the store, and instead of seeing like every single other genre of beer have a shelf, I was like, where's the Jewish beer shelf? Like, how cool would that be? And they're like, oh, well, that Jewish beer from Portland, Maine is incredible, but have you tried the Jewish beer from Seattle? What about that Jewish beer from Dallas? And you're like, if this was a necessity and a great idea, how is it possible that not one other person or brewery did it? That's weird to me. And I am proud that I stuck with it.
What's the answer? I mean, there's lots of different kosher wines, and people keep putting kosher wine on the market.
Snacks.
But
so here's my two theories. One is, we did such a good job that nobody dare mess with it. I mean, come on, Bittersweet Lenny's RIP, the Hanukkah pass the beer. Come on, who's going to compete with that? The other alternative is, it turns out, why would anybody do it? It's not a great. It's just raise your level of pain threshold, and just get the one person who will then talk some other people into doing it, and pay some people along the way, and make it happen. I mean, it's so crazy. The other day, about 6 months ago, I looked in QuickBooks, and we had paid like millions of dollars in payroll over the years. Millions, lots of millions, like over 10 million. Maybe even 15. And that is pretty cool that we were able to run an organization and feed people's mouths and minds and guts and taste buds, and to be able to pull this off with, I had a punchline in the original press release said, "Exile never tasted so good."
Right.
I mean, this is not a real business idea. This is a fluke.
Yeah.
But yet, I worked with some of the same people for decades.
Yeah,
and
you kept it going.
So it's pretty cool. I mean, it's our customers. Like, that's who kept it going. We couldn't. I could have made all the punchlines I wanted, but if people didn't buy the beer, if
it wasn't good, they wouldn't have. It wasn't great.
True.
I mean, I think your challenge, you had to be twice as good for the same money as everybody else, because it's kind of proved
definitely was a challenge. I mean, the big one that nobody would really care or think about is the supply chain. The sales channel. The sales channel was a big challenge. Hey, what's up, Joe? I just saw your note there. Joe Granite. Joey Kegs just checks in. That's awesome. Thanks, man.
Somebody from that is Hebrew sold in Israel, and did you have to go through any hoops there to sell it there? Or?
Yeah, the original VAT was so anti-importing beer because they were trying to protect, Maccabi and Tempo and Gold Star. It's a little less of an issue now, but the beer market in Israel is new. It's really cool. I went right before COVID. COVID, I happened. Yeah, I had a great time. I hung out at Alexander and Gems and Beer Bazaar and my longtime colleague David at Dancing Camel, who's the pioneer of the whole place. I also had an amazing trip and went to Teba and Ramallah and met them, and they are so cool, amazing. So the thing is, we think craft beer is big here, and we think Jews are small here. It's everything's just tiny there, and so a business model out there and trying to sell volume to justify even the cost of doing it is a challenge. Not impossible. I would love it if one of the Israeli brewers wanted to take a stab at a little Shmaltz in the homeland. Go for it. I have all the recipes and plenty of flyers available digitally.
I mean, your recipes are so Israel centric, and
they are. Yeah.
The food, the things you put into it are so native to Israel.
Yeah, Israel centric and comedy club centric. It's kind of a good combination.
So if people want to ask you more questions or want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, I think hit the website. So I have a fantastic coworker who's checking all of our messages.
Okay.
We're totally spread out. So Facebook, you can send a note, which is great. The problem is, we're not so great with Facebook as well. Instagram, people want to send notes too. That's cool. We have Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, but info at Shmaltz Brewing is probably the best way. You can just hit the website and jump in on info at Shmaltz Brewing.
And so you're going to be going into consulting, you're going to be doing your contracting, and you're going to give
I have a little brand in New York City called Alphabet City Brewing Company, which is kind of Jewish. It's like the Jewish punk rock immigrant experience of the Lower East Side mixed with Allen Ginsberg and a bougie food program. It's a great combination, and we're going to explore that a little bit.
Is there a retail part to that?
No, it's just wholesale. It's through Manhattan Beer, also owned by a wonderful Jewish family. He's doing some amazing stuff in New York. Grateful for them for carrying our Alphabet City line. And then I've got the tasting room in upstate in Troy. We took a little tour of. Sorry, anybody who came on late, but come visit us. We love it. And then the little consulting practice, which actually is kind of, got some cool stuff. I did a new brand for some friends in New Jersey this year, and I'm helping an incredible website, the OG website, probrewer.com. Give a little shout out to those guys. Love it. They participated in my class of 96 bash reunions this year for our 25th anniversary. They've kind of more or less sponsored the whole thing, which has been wonderful. And we've still got more to go. We started in Denver, went to Troy here in upstate New York, then went to San Francisco. Now I've got you, and this is our fourth event on the tour, which is really cool. We're everywhere worldwide, forward wise. And then we're coming up next week is Philadelphia. That's on the 18th. And then the 20th in Syracuse, and then back in Troy for donuts and latkes for Hanukkah, first night of Hanukkah. It's all on the website. And then we have New York for our ultimate Hanukkah versus Christmas with the guys who got me there in the first place on that event. Big
Ryan in New York City.
Brian, it'll be at Spite and Dival on the 4th of December, and Barcade in Williamsburg. And then I'm going to go get a little sun and do the Jewish pilgrimage. Not quite getting to Boca. I'm going to Tampa. I'm going to wrap it up in Tampa, which are my wonderful, wonderful friends at the Independent. And I'm really excited to spend time with them and celebrate a class of 96 with a brewery we haven't worked with before, Dunedin. And an old friend of mine, perfect, Gidon at Original Sin, the cidery that started in 1996 as well. So,
I
think lineup.
Yeah, and I think that just shows that people, have a hard time saying goodbye. What you did is you just be really proud that you had this idea, that you followed through on it, that you created something from nothing, and you brought something beautiful and fun and meaningful into the world. So I want to again, we have to close up, but I want to again raise a glass or a can. And I wish I was drinking it there with you, Jeremy.
That
I want to
sounds
thank
good.
everybody who participated. I really appreciate your coming onto the Zoom, and I know you wish Jeremy the best. We're going to have another event on Tuesday, unfortunately on anti-Semitism, which maybe won't be as fun, but maybe we'll be drinking more at that event. I want to thank Aaron White at the Forward for hosting this, and everybody on the staff support helped put these things together. Jeremy, thank you so much for
Dude, this
doing
has
this.
been awesome,
I
Rob.
am
Thank you.
I'm
It's a
proud
great
of you.
idea.
I'm really
I love
proud of
it.
what you did.
Thanks, man.
I super enjoyed your beer all through. And I know I'll find bottles here and there and still enjoy it. So I wish you the best.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
congratulations and thank
Dude,
you.
amazing. Thank you.
Okay,
And I really appreciate it. This has been awesome.
really fun. Thanks, Jeremy. Bye,
L'chaim,
everybody.
everybody.
L'chaim.